Okay, hey everyone, welcome, and very much thanks for coming, considering this 4 o'clock on a Wednesday, and you could be somewhere else at a party, but you're here watching this, so I really appreciate it. So, I would love it if I could get, I'm going to do that thing where I'm going to ask you to put up your hand, and that's just to get a read of the room here. So, in terms of like company size or stage that you're all at, I'd love to see how many people would describe themselves as like indie, startup, small company. Okay, cool. Anyone AA? And then, yeah, and anyone from AAA? Okay, sweet. Okay, great. All right, thanks so much. And my one last hand up thing would be, is anyone in the realm of HR, recruiting, talent, anything like that? Okay, great, thanks. You can keep me honest on some of these topics as well. But, hey, before we dive into that, my talk today, I'd love to talk to you all about Brad Pitt, not because I find him incredibly attractive, but also he starred in a film, Moneyball, and I think about this concept of Moneyball quite often. So whether you know it or not, I'm about to explain it. So he played a guy, a real life guy. Here he is here. It's called Billy Beane. And so Billy Beane, back in 2002, was the coach of a baseball team called the Oakland A's. Now, I know nothing about baseball, but this story is fantastic. And so he comes to this team, notoriously the underdogs, constantly losing games, and he comes in with a tiny budget. But him, along with Jonah Hill, who played this real-life guy called Peter Brand, together with a very new take on using stats and hiring, they managed to find this incredible ragtag team that then went on to win 20 consecutive games in a row, creating an all-time record, going on to beat the New York Yankees. And so this concept here, and this is a great quote from Peter Brand, I believe there is a championship team that we can afford because everyone undervalues them. And ultimately, it's not about the players, it's about the team. And so that is really, I think, some of the core concept that I'm going to be talking about today. So, wait a minute, who are you? My name's Joe Burridge, and I'm the head of talent at Play Ventures. So Play Ventures is an early stage gaming VC, so we invest in gaming startups. But this was very much a collage of me and who I am. In the bottom left is some of my favorite games of all time. In the top left there, I hail from a small town called Newton Abbot in Devon, in the southwest of England. Yeah, there we go. So one person knows it. I love that. So, and that in the top left there, I like to do trail running. Devon's a beautiful place to be doing that. I run a podcast where I interview leaders from across the games industry, and we talk about talent topics. It's called a Talent Game Podcast. I also have a physical Blacktro deck, and I'm so proud of it. I put it into this talk today. Here's some pictures at me at conferences, including developed last year. At the bottom is actually a family portrait from one of the D&D illustrators. So I have 3 daughters who are in there somewhere. I think my eldest is a druid and my middle one's a barbarian or something there. And if you want to find me on social media, either put my name in or on some of them I'm at Joe Finds Talent. Yeah, feel free to stalk me on those. Right, and this is my career, and funny enough, being in the games industry, I very much think of it as leveling up. So this is 16 years wrapped up into one slide. So I did a philosophy degree, and because there were no philosopher jobs, I moved to London and started in tech, in the tech industry. So recruitment agency hiring for tech startups, and then moved to in-house to a sports analytics company called Huddle. This is where I find out all about Moneyball and everything else. But I joined there just after their Series B, helped them grow from 200 to 1,000 in about 2.5 years. That was a wild ride. But I was usually the person in the office organizing the LAN parties and the board games nights and these sorts of things. So managed to achieve the dream of getting into the games industry. My first role back in 2017, moving to EA. So while I was at EA for about 3.5 years, hiring for their game studios primarily across Europe, so like DICE with Star Wars Battlefront and Battlefield, then Criterion with Need for Speed, and also the Frostbite team, their in-house game engine. After 3.5 years there, a lot of the work with Frostbite led to actually moving over to Epic and leading a team to hire for the Unreal Engine team. So well up against the Unreal Engine 5 launch, frantically hiring, launched that, and then I moved over to the game side there. So I was there at Epic Games for about 3 years, initially on Unreal Engine, and then moved over to the Fortnite team. And now I get to pair together all of that experience. So from the gaming side, but then also that earlier career stuff I did with tech startups. So now the VC where I work with, we have about 90 companies in the portfolio. And my role is to work with founders and help them on everything to do with talent. So HR, recruiting, hiring, culture, everything like that. So what will I be talking about today? Well, flywheel is definitely one thing. If you Google flywheel, this is the picture that comes up. So, but what is a flywheel? A flywheel is a definition, a virtuous cycle where each positive action reinforces the others. This specific flywheel is the concept I want to be coming back to a lot today. And it's the idea that with all of these three different aspects, no matter which one you improve, you are going to be improving the other two. So if you put a lot of effort into making sure your hiring process and your standards are exceptional, you're going to have better performance and a better brand, and so on and so forth with the others there. One thing I want to mention before I start diving into all of this is that there will be a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to be covering a lot of concepts which some of them alone would be talks within themselves. So I'm going to be going, skirting along many broad topics. So do not hesitate to ask me tricky questions at the end or anything like that perhaps I didn't dive into depth enough. Right, and the point being here is that I genuinely believe, coming from the world of startups and then into AAA and back into startups again, I really believe that indies, startups, small companies have some massive advantages that it can take advantage of, funnily enough. And I don't think it's always very obvious, or that perhaps these small companies really dial into that, thinking that, well, these bigger companies get all the best people. Definitely not the case, and I want to run through how that can be done. But before we think about why would someone join your indie studio, or why would someone join your small company, I think a really good lens to switch over to is thinking about, well, why do people quit their jobs in the first place? And McKinsey did a great study on this about 3 years ago. And in terms of surveying people, why do they quit their jobs, especially top performers, why do they quit their jobs and move on to somewhere else? So that's a lot of tiny words on screen. So if we look at the top 5 reasons here of why people quit their jobs. So the top 5, I'll run through them. So lack of career development, inadequate compensation, uncaring and uninspiring leaders, lack of meaningful work, and unsuitable work expectations. And I think you can summarize that as we want growth, fair compensation, leadership, purpose, and trust. If we break down those 5, what that really means in practice is, well, when we're looking at growth, we're thinking about faster career progression. Small companies, you can just learn so much more, so much faster. You have the ability to really make a stamp on things, not just being a cog in a machine, but having genuine impact and learning opportunities from that. And with less red tape and bureaucracy, there's more learning to be done because you can just move faster and get things done. When we talk about fair compensation, it's smaller companies, yes, you may offer lower salaries, but what is the offset? Compensation isn't just your salary that lands in your bank every month. I think there's possibility for equity or even profit sharing models, giving you a chance at that lottery ticket when all of your hard work in the studio pays off eventually down the road. Also thinking about really transparent conversations with no HR layers. Okay, why are you offering this salary? What's the financial state of the company? And having those very transparent conversations are possible. And also room for creative deal making. And I think flexibility is a really key one here. I've given some examples. It could be 4-day weeks and potential bonuses, even just upskilling support, and it goes on. So where you can have, with smaller companies, there might be so much more room for discussing what does that overall compensation look like. On the leadership side, well, I worked at these very big companies and never actually met the CEOs, obviously. But at smaller companies, you can deal directly with founders and leadership team. There's so much visibility in how decisions are actually made, and you can have so much buy-in for that. And you yourself can have your voice heard by this leadership team and potentially even influence those company decisions. When it comes to purpose, it's ultimately maybe a smaller company, but with a really focused mission. And that's what gets you incredibly excited about building that and building something you have a ton of empathy for and an emotional drive for. And the last one is trust. So I already mentioned about the autonomy and flexibility that you can have, as well as like helping to shape the culture and all of that transparency and authenticity that is, like I said, baked in here. It's just part and parcel of working with a smaller team. So I love this quote from Simon Sinek. If you don't know who he is, he's written some great books. Start With Why is one of them, for example. And so this quote here: when people are financially invested, they want to return. But the key point bit, when they're emotionally invested, they really want to contribute. And it's about finding those people, keeping them, and creating a really compelling reason for other people to come join. Okay, I'm going to take a quick breath. So the first of the three topics here is hiring. And I spent 13 years of my career talking about this, and again, I'm going to skirt over some really high-level points. But two phrases here. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And what you measure is what you get. And the key point that I often say to founders is, like, how are you assessing for culture? This rather nebulous word that is feel fluffy, touchy-feely, but can you get to the point where you can somewhat quantify if someone is a good cultural addition to your company? Like, how do you get there? I genuinely believe, and we'll come back to this as well in future slides, that your skills and deliverables together is equal worth as the cultural addition and cultural fit for that business. And I really think there are ways that you can introduce really quick wins to be assessing that. Before we get into that, there are some low-hanging fruit that I just want to look at. And I was thinking, well, if I'm creating a whole presentation on hiring and advice, I at least want to give you some really quick hiring advice that you can take away. So the first one is, I'd say, using specialist boutique recruiters. Usually that's money well spent. When you're small, you can negotiate smaller fees, and if they're specialists, they have a really great access to talent. So many founders I talk to are really hesitant about actually spending money on this. And also, your own referral network will eventually run out. So highly recommend that. If you want any recommendations, I'm happy to give them. So promote roles in niche forums. Just be incredibly proactive. Online forums, events, everything else, like so many of you are here. Great start. Driving referrals. This is a huge topic within itself, but ultimately, some of the best hires that you will make and some of the people that will stick around the longest will come from referral. And that's, even though I said your referral network may run out eventually, well, those initially, the ones that you really know, the ones that come with trusted references, fantastic. For example, at Epic, a third of all hires came through referrals, and particularly proud of that metric. Don't fear headhunting AAA talent, for a start. I think that's another thing. Oh, I won't reach out to that person because I'm going to assume they won't respond or they won't be interested. How do you know unless you ask? I think about both EA and Epic. In our HR systems there, we had reasons for people why they left. And there's a variety of reasons, but both companies had left for a startup, right? And AAA and large companies know that they can't always offer these variety of autonomy, ownership, and these sorts of things. It's well known, and so you don't know unless you go out and ask people. Train your whole team to be evangelists. Really, really train them. Make sure that they know they're an ambassador for the company, and that every time they possibly can, any conversation, they're really talking in unison about the mission, the company, why it's great to work there, suddenly you just have an army of, well, small army in this case, small army of people out there promoting your company, and it makes a massive difference. Write better job ads. The easiest way to do that is using AI. Thank goodness you don't have to now be a wordsmith. But even better is just look at other job ads, find ones that you find compelling and learn from that and use those tips. And lastly, it's an obvious one to anyone who's been in HR and recruiting, and that's use an applicant tracking system. The amount of times where, I don't know if you've seen it or if you've ever applied to a job and you've never had any response back, and that's usually because a company has very poor recruiting systems, or they are just overwhelmed with applications and they feel like they can't respond to anyone. There's some very cheap solutions out there where you can at least have an automated message to let people then know they haven't been successful, and you can move so much quicker through the process. That was all the low-hanging fruit. I want to get into some of the more deeper details now. So a really quick one, and the next 2 slides have so many questions on, so I'm not going to read them out at all. But the point here is, like, should you be hiring in the first place? And I think this is a great exercise to run with your team. I think, especially for me, coming from VC, we give essentially millions of dollars to a company, and their initial thought is to be like, right, it's hiring time, it's go time. And very often I'm pushing back to say, okay, but should you be hiring that role? Do you really understand what you need from that position? Because if you just go in and start speaking to people, it's very clear and evident that you don't know what you're looking for, and that can really damage your brand. And these are some great questions to help you figure out if that's the case. Also, how do you measure culture? And this is really the key thing here. So first of all, can you even describe your culture to someone? Someone says, hey, what's the culture like at your game studio? Can you really give some very specific examples of, oh yeah, we're very collaborative? It's like, all right, yeah, well, so are a lot of companies. Can you give some really specific examples? Oh yeah, we love to work together, or we're genre specialists, or whatever the answer is. Make sure you have some really tangible, solid examples that you can give when talking about your culture. And again, here's some other questions to help you uncover what that culture means. And also, the reality is, your culture might be not where you want it to be. And so that's okay as well. In fact, I would also explain that to candidates. Say, hey, we're here right now, but we are proactively looking to change it, and a great way to change it is one hire at a time. And also, do your values reflect the culture? And they're not just words on the wall, you're living them. So, how do you measure culture? The short answer is values, but ultimately every candidate should be assessed for both skills and culture. So, talking about values here. The reason why values matter. Is because most companies do not do them very well. Most companies they start a company, oh, we need some values for the website or something, to put them up there, and they never talk about them ever again. I think about Huddle, that company I worked at before, and many other examples of companies where the values are not only just a fantastic representation of what the culture is and what they aspire to be, but they're also a decision-making tool. Every time there's a large decision, or even small ones, to be made within the company, they're thinking about, okay, does that align with our values? Does that make sense? And also, whenever we're hiring, and also when we're measuring performance in the company, are we thinking, okay, is that person living the values? Are they a cultural addition and adding value to the business? So, quick one on creating values. You want to involve the whole company. You want to decide on values as a leadership team, and ultimately communicate them across the business. It shouldn't just be a top-down approach, this is what we want it to be. The culture is just a collaboration of everybody in the business, and everyone wants their voices heard. Okay, I'm going to give a really specific and tangible example of how Epic Games hires for culture over and over again. So whilst I was there for about 3 years, and watched it grow from about 2,000 to 6,000 in that time. And the common theme with every single interview is that every interviewer was trained on how to assess for the Epic culture, and it was you'd have a scorecard, and we'd see that over and over again. And when you times that by tens of thousands of interviews and thousands of hires, you get to the point where you should have some sort of cohesive culture. And you can do this in small companies too. So here's the first example I'll give for you. So Epic actually has three values. One of them is do the right thing. The other one is own the outcome. And the last one is not on the screen there. And so, but let's start with do the right thing. So you've decided that do the right thing is a company value of yours. You've communicated that to the team. You've given managers really specific examples of what that means so that they can coach their to other people in the business on that. And also when it comes to interview, you are given 3 example interview questions of like how to dig into whether someone aligns with that value. And the story I'll give here, this was a real scorecard from a programmer who interviewed on the Fortnite team. And so you'll notice here, right? So on the skills side, they did not pass the C++ or the Unreal Engine skills assessment. However, the consistent theme across everyone that met them was that they were exceptionally strong cultural fit. Every interviewer could give really solid examples of why get things done, own the outcome, and do the right thing were there. And so for me, as a bit of feedback to them, I can say, hey, unfortunately you're not getting an offer because of these specific skill deficits. However, we really believe you'd be an amazing addition to the business in general. If you go away, work on these C++ and Unreal Engine skills, we would love to hear from you again. Let's keep in touch. So I said, come back in a year. So it was almost like a year to the day. They clearly had like a calendar reminder in there. And then came back, fast-tracked through the process because they'd already been through it before, showed they'd learned the skills, still a fantastic culture fit, and now it ended up being a fantastic hire on the gameplay programming team for Fortnite. And so really just this incredibly simple scorecard is rated from strong no, yes, strong yes. If you can implement that in your studio for every single hire, every single person who talks to them knows how to assess the specific skills for that job. The skills will change pretty much every time you're interviewing for something, depending on the level and the craft. But every time the values stay the same for every single hire, C-level to intern, the values always remain the same. And you can have these really fantastic conversations with people, whether you're hiring them or not, about why that is the case. And far too often, people who neglect the cultural side, they really do not know how to assess culture for their specific business. That's a fast track to ultimately creating mismatches and potentially toxic hires that sink your business. And that sounds very hyperbolic, but that is very much the truth. Usually at that point I stop for questions, but we're gonna power through. So the second point on that flywheel. Okay, so you've done an exceptional job with your hiring. So you know how to assess for culture. You've driven the bar higher. Okay, so you've hired people out in a fantastic values and cultural fit, and they may have some learning to do, and they may not come from the top schools or the top companies, but because they're a fantastic cultural fit, then you can get so much productivity and morale boosting and creativity going that perhaps hiring 5 people who are completely misaligned from top schools or top companies, you smash them together and nothing good comes out of that. But instead, you're taking that moneyball approach and thinking about, well, I don't necessarily need this top talent as long as they are a very cohesive team, which I think is exceptionally important in games. So performance, what I mean by performance is, okay, you've done an amazing job bringing them in, but how do you make sure that they are then delivering and that they are as performant as possible? And so really this calculation I bring up all the time. So culture, which I've just talked about quite a bit, plus performance management equals retention. And retention, by the way, I mean like your employees actually stick around. So Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, we've always believed that if you focus on people and culture, performance will follow. And that is at the hiring step and all the way through your running your business. And performance management, by the way, it sounds incredibly corporate, I guess, but the point being is that If I ask a founder of a company or someone in the leadership team, I'd be like, do you know who your top performers are? And it'd be like, oh yeah, obviously this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Who are your bottom performers? Like, maybe these. And it's like, okay, and what rigor have you done? Is it purely just your perception? You think the loudest person in the room or the best programmer is your top performer? Or where have you got that information from? It's so open to bias if you're not doing any sort of measurement of that. And it doesn't have to be really intense. It can be as simple as writing a Google form and asking for peer feedback consistently. The reason why performance management matters in any sort of sense, any sort of coaching, offering advice back to your employees, is because 44% better talent retention. Also, if people leave, that typically costs on average around 6 to 9 months of salary. That includes them leaving, the backfill, and getting back up to productivity. Companies that have really great performance feedback typically report 23% higher profitability. And this is very much the case when it comes to, I work at a VC, we invest. If a founder comes to us and is like, hey, this is our performance management methodology in terms of ensuring that we're coaching and growing our employees, that's incredibly attractive to investors. So the way I think about it is you can categorize all of your employees, everybody in the company, into 3 categories. You've got your A players. These are your top performers. You've got your above bar employees. These are your core. And then you'll have your underperformers. And I've given some percentages here, but really these can vary quite widely. Point being, on the far right column is how you interact with these employees should be very different. These A players should be promoted and compensated. These core players should be pushed to become A players, and you should give them plenty of opportunities to do so. And these underperformers, they should be exited from the company. And how you do that as well is a skill to be learned. Probably too much to go into today. But this is the key thing. When we talk about retention and building a company and keeping your very best people, the fastest way to lose them is by tolerating underperformers. And just to clarify what I mean by underperformers, I talked about how skills and deliverables are equally as important as culture. You could be fantastic on the skills and deliverables, but you can very much be an underperformer when it comes to culture. For example, talented assholes fall under that category, right? They are exceptional at delivery. They are underperformers when it comes to culture. And you can also, maybe if you worked with people who have the complete other way around, fantastic cultural contributors. They're very much the personality hires. Well, they also don't really deliver, but they are great at keeping morale high. Both of those are issues that have different problems to solve, but more is the first one. It's A players, by the way, is fantastic at skills and deliverables, fantastic at culture. That is your A players. Your A players are not purely on the skills and deliverables. And if you have no way at measuring your culture and have a bar for success in your culture, then you have no way at figuring out who your A players are, and that's a real problem. So, what should you measure? Deliverables, skills, and culture, as we just mentioned. And the point being, the talented assholes, I love Iron Man, but Iron Man 1, he was one of those, and he had a great redemption arc. And the point being is that someone who's underperforming culturally may not be aware, and if you have some really tangible coaching examples, you can bring someone up to speed on that. It's not just inbuilt and they cannot change. The same way that someone can learn skills and deliverables and get better at that, someone can become much better cultural addition to the company too. So this is very much a more intensive way of doing it, but I thought I'd show an example. So say you have your performance management on the skills side, you have your programmer, and you're talking about all the different ways, all the different micro examples of how they can improve as an engineer and a programmer. Great. Do you have that in-depth feedback when it comes to each value? For example, the get it done. You could even just have a yes-no in terms of behaviors that you want to see, and you can measure that over time. And if you're consistently doing that every quarter or every 6 months or even just once a year is better than nothing. Trying to get some way in which you can show someone, here's how you can improve. You were voted fantastic in these areas of delivering on get it done, but actually some of these examples here need some work. So what you measure is what you get. If you do not measure culture, you will not be able to improve it. And continuous performance feedback leads to better retention. And again, this is such a massive selling point. If you, as a small company, say, hey, when you arrive in here, we're really passionate about growing our employees. Here's, for example, the framework of how we do it. It's very basic. We're quite small right now, but you will get feedback, and we really believe in that. Again, comes back into the flywheel. And here's some more statistics. Right. So has anyone heard of the Netflix keeper test by any chance? Okay, 2, 3, great. So the Netflix keeper test, this is a performance management methodology used at Netflix and has been used over the years. And it's typically two questions for managers. So the first one would be about their reports and the people they hired. So with all the information that you know now, would you have hired this person again? And it's a simple yes, no. And the other question would be, looking at the performance review from the last 6 months, would it be painful if this person left your team? Yes or no? Either of those questions are a no, then it's pretty ruthless, but that person then goes on considering exiting the business. Now, that sounds pretty brutal, but the point being is it's manager bias. Like managers are could be highly empathetic and bought in with their team, but ultimately tolerating underperformers means that your best performers will leave, and it's a fast track to disintegrating your business. And we all know Netflix has done pretty well for themselves. It's just an idea and something to think about. Okay, heading into our final and shortest part of the presentation here. And so the final part of the flywheel, brand. I mentioned about performance will improve brand. So you've done exceptional hiring. You've hired for skills and deliverables. You've also hired for culture. Great. You've brought them in. You know you can identify who are the top performers, you're above bar, you're underperformers, you're coaching and growing your team, they're learning, they're happy. Fantastic. So you've now got highly performant, happy employees, and that spills out into the wider industry. That alone will be a fantastic brand. And when I talk about brand, I mean specifically employment brand. And what employment brand is what is your reputation about what it's like to actually work at your company? I'm sure all of you in the games industry can think of companies that have a very bad reputation for that, right? So, talk about crunch culture and these sorts of things. But you may also come to mind thinking of, oh, I know a fantastic company. I love to work there. Or I have friends who work somewhere and they rave about it non-stop. And they do that naturally. They haven't been told by the company necessarily to do it. And that is just employment brand coming out. And so I wanted to run through some really quick and easy things that you can do to improve your employment brand for either free or very cheap. And also some real life examples of where I think it's actually done really well by game studios. So the point is that you're trying to make people fall in love with the idea of working at your game studio and the mission and the product and everything that you're doing. So it's knowing and understanding candidates will research you. And very often, if you're a founder or a leader and you're working hard at your company, the amount of times I speak to people, well, I don't post on LinkedIn, or it's oh, well, the website will come later, but they're still trying to hire incredibly fast. Or when a candidate does come to, Google you, what can they find? Absolutely nothing. And then it's a bit suspect. So investing some time, or at least enabling your employees to have the free will to post about their experience of working there, or even having some sort of way that you can lift the curtain and show what it's like to work at your company could be incredibly valuable. So, exactly my point. Encourage and amplify employee-created content. Before you do that, make sure you train them, give some guidelines about what you want them to see, what you want them to do even. But if you can get to the point where your employees are the ambassadors, they're out there really with a consistent message, and you allow them to freely post on social, go to events and talk about your company, and do all of these things, eventually it will just be a snowballing effect where all of that positive energy and thought process about your company goes out into the industry. I would also say authenticity beats polish. I think I've seen it before where companies be like, okay, and we're going to hire a creative agency. They're going to do this super expensive video showing, the behind the scenes in my studio. That's great. I genuinely believe a lot of the time that's a waste of money. You'll get so much more value out of just saying to employees, feel free with your smartphones to record yourselves or record in the office or things like that. I also just think about it's more authentic. Even if it's just it's not that polished, even it's more authentic and it appeals to people so much more. I also think about the value of TikTok content and short form content. It's not the polished content that usually does exceptionally well. It's typically the stuff that is just shot on your phone and feels real. So really encourage employees for that and save yourself some cash at the same time. And your employment brand is part of your flywheel. Exactly right. So all of the things that I've mentioned before about your hiring process, your culture, and everything else, it really does fast track all of that. The better your brand, the more that people would love to work for you, the more that people would love to apply for jobs with you, and you can access even better cultural additions for your business, as well as obviously better skills as well. All right, here's a few examples. So Klang, mostly based out of Berlin in Germany. What I really like, I just screenshot their website, and every single person in the studio is there. There's a very brief bio about them and a picture of them. That's incredibly simple. In fact, you would probably know a lot of websites that do it, but still, it brings a face. People want to empathize and imagine actually working with these people. Incredibly simple to do. Massive entertainment. Actually, so they did these videos a while back, but again with the lack of polish or authenticity, specifically Massive, based out of Malmo, I believe. But they did these great insider videos, just employee interviews and just tours around the studio. And I know I've given a AAA example there, but some of these videos are really very genuine, and I think it's very much worth checking them out for some inspiration. Even just having on your website there, Gorilla, again, just quick interviews with employees and just writing about your values and what you believe in. Hazelight even coined the term Haze Life, and they talk a lot about Haze Life on their company blog, on their website. There's plenty of videos there as well, showing them what happens when they launch a game, or what happens when there's particular anniversaries throughout the year. Again, this is all web for now, but and it's one of our investments here, Hypersonic Labs. They've just set up in Guildford. They have their benefits really clearly on their website for you to look at, as well as plenty of employee stories to go along with that. I don't know if anyone knows of Noble Steed Games, UK indie studio, but I love that on their website, in the About Us section, as well as they have a blog, all about their studio culture. It's really specific, it's really authentically written, and also plenty of pictures of them, of the actual employees playing games, hanging out together, and these sorts of things. East Shade Studios. So actually, the example I was going to give here is, I'm using my laser pointer here, is actually this video. I think it had something 1.8 million views on that. And it was just a very candid video on them talking about this couple who founded their own indie studio, about how they made it, and how they got from concept to completion. There's so much behind the scenes in terms of step by step, the world building and everything else, and that just really resonated with the audience there. Obviously, it helped lead, led to Steam wish lists and sales and things. But the point is that is such a fantastic, authentic video of the founders that I really had to include it in there. Mighty Bear Games, this is another one of our investments based out of Singapore. And they've fully embraced the just record it off your phone TikTok style videos. Their best video here is 1.4 million views, and that's effectively just the studio just messing around and play testing their games. And they've had varied success with some other videos as well. Continuing on with the TikTok theme, Yaldi Games, who are based Yeah, I think they're based here in the UK. Really, these are usually about 20, 30-second clips. And it's just really simple concepts of their game. Like this one on the left here is just talking about the plants in the game. 30 seconds, founders narrating it, and an exceptional amount of views. 1.4 million views on that. So the point being is you don't have to overthink a lot of this thing. It's just there's so many people just dying to see the inside look of your studio and what you're doing, and you forget that like what you can all do is effectively creating magic, creating worlds and bringing them to life, and just having any sort of insight into that, into the people that do that, is incredibly exciting. And even the mega corporate Amazon, like you go on their website, there's a clear explanation of every single value and leadership principle and examples for each. Oh, and I included this example of myself during the pandemic at EA. I just got 5 other recruiters in 5 other locations across Europe and North America just to talk about the reality of what it is like hiring at EA. And that was just recorded on a Zoom call and put up on the internet and had a really strong reception. So, final few slides. Coming up to slide 70, which is the very last one here. Again, it's this example of the flywheel. So when I was going to talk about how indies can compete with AAA for talent, I assumed most of you were going to think I was going to be talking about headhunting and these other concepts. But actually, what will make you stand out so much more from the rest is paying attention to these 3. Of course, having a fantastic hiring process, but actually the other 2 that then lead people to you and to attract them to you. And so, yeah, my pals Jonah and Brad, like at the beginning, it's not about the players, it's about the team. That's slide 69. Thanks. I think we literally have time for 2 or 3 minutes worth of questions. So has anyone got any questions there? Yeah?
Is this on? Yeah. Afternoon. Great talk. Thanks for that. I was surprised at your focus on culture, if I'm honest. I did expect some different content. Digging in a little bit deeper, on some of the slides you showed, I got the impression that when you are looking to assess culture, particularly in the interview stage for candidates, you seem to use questions, scenario-based questions. Tell me about a time about X.
Yeah.
What perhaps did you do? Maybe the STAR method or equivalent you might be surfacing there, I'm not sure. To be frank, those are questions that, in my experience, can quite easily be blagged, to use a polite phrase. What guidance, approach, recommendations would you suggest if there is to be an emphasis or a notion of culture to try and accurately assess it from candidates?
Yeah, I love that question, thanks. I think the premise there is like past performance is the best predictor of future success. So a worse scenario of that would be to ask a hypothetical future question. Like, hey, you're in this scenario in our company and this happens, what would you do? Suddenly the candidate's on the spot thinking about their most perfect view of themselves handling a hypothetical situation. However, if you ask about their past performance, you can dig in layer by layer. And the way to catch out someone ultimately giving you BS is really to drill in. If they genuinely did that thing on that project, they would be so comfortable being able to share all of that detail. I think the second thing there would be, if you really understand your value, say collaboration. Collaboration's top. We need to find high collaborators. We don't want people who work in silos and really reject that idea. So then it's like, cool, like what are the green flags and what are the red flags for those sorts of examples? It's like, okay, cool, tell me about your last project. You start high level, talking about team and everything else. And it's like, okay, what was your contribution? Or a great question for that would be, like, tell me about the worst team you've been a part of. Why was it the worst? What would you do like to improve it? And being able to like peel back those layers. If someone is trying to give you BS, ultimately they'll stumble upon themselves in the end. And the point is, if it's just you assessing for culture, like a lot of companies do, this is the culture interview. This is the one time out of all the interview process we're going to assess you for our values. But if everybody is doing it from the very initial call, the informal initial call, all the way through to the final interview, you've got however many people consistently looking for the green flags and red flags of culture. You bring all of that feedback together, and it's like, hey, did you catch anything? Is there any inconsistencies? Or are there any examples that really are fantastic for that culture? Oh yeah, I picked up on that too, and you can have a collaborative conversation about that. So that would be my answer for you there. I hope that was a solid answer to that question. Cool. Do we have time for another question? I think so. Yeah, this person has a question here. And just while that microphone's going, saying surprise about the culture, I often say to founders, I can do a great job in bringing people to you, but ultimately, if you have nothing in place to keep them and make them performant, then what's the point? So it's all about the long term is shipping your game, growing your business. So ultimately, you need to have all of those in check so that you can do that and grow and be a successful game studio. Yeah.
Even without hiring, I think there's a lot of value in making values and making performance explicit and identifiable and measurable in a company. For an indie company, even, I mean to say. With this in mind, though, indie companies are obviously quite more compact, almost more intimate with a very few number of people, which means that there can be difficulties because there's no real wall of roles. Obviously, you can dedicate roles to different people so that they are justified in doing their role well, but it's all very interpersonal at that sort of rate. So I was wondering if you had any advice in terms of making these matters of sort of culture, values, and performance explicit within the frame of an indie company with sort of less members.
Yeah. I would say it's great for, it's got to come from the leadership team. They've got to also be living the values. Like, I used to work for a company whose value was professionalism, and it's probably one of the most unprofessional places I've ever worked in my life, right? So it's like, if there's a value and it's on the wall and the leadership team are living them, then they should also bring them up constantly in performance reviews. In fact, at Huddle, we used to have quarterly votes on who was living those values the best, and they would get those awards as well. So like, one of the values was be respectfully blunt, right? And that was all about candid feedback to each other. And we'd have quarterly like highlights of which employee was living that the most. I guess, yeah, smaller studios, fine, is a bit trickier. And as you grow, your culture will change, therefore your values will change. But if it's a constant discussion, if it's a constant, hey, we've got a tough decision to make. Okay, what are our values? Are we living them? If we are living them, then, okay, cool, we can move forward with conviction and a lot quicker. So really, it's just a case of mentioning them more often and then, therefore, acting them out as well for all employees to see.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions? Out of time. Thank you very much.